Hello everyone, today I'll be talking about golden testing in Flutter, and a few words about me at first. So I'm a senior Flutter developer at LeanCode. For the last 2 years I have been a Flutter tech lead at one of the major Polish banks, and I started working with Flutter in 2020. Previously I worked with some other technologies, both mobile and web frontend, and so the agenda for today's talk is first I'm going to talk a bit about what golden testing is in Flutter, how it works. Then I'll move to a case study, so I'll show you how we approach golden testing in our banking app. And specifically I'll be talking about how we approach testing widgets and how we approach testing pages. And also I'm going to talk about the CI, how it worked on the CI, the issues which we had with the CI. And then I'll show you some non-obvious use cases as an inspiration on how you might use golden tests in your projects. So how many of you have used golden tests in your projects? Okay, so only some people. So let's start with the term golden test, because it's not that familiar for most people, and it is a term that has been used in software engineering for actually quite a long time but never got quite popular. I find some old reference to it when I did some research, but what golden tests are, I mean, the main definition is for golden file. So a golden file is the expected output of some test stored as a separate file rather than as a string literal inside the test code. So what this basically means that instead of doing like standard assertions at the end of each test, we have some file that is the expected output of that test, and when we run the test we compare the actual output to this like reference file. So that's what golden file is. What other technologies, the term other technologies use, like iOS, Android, also React, is snapshot tests, which I think is much more accurate, because golden testing in Flutter is related exclusively to images. So what golden files are in Flutter are images. So basically our UI, our widget tree is rendered as an image, and that's what we compare. So basically if we have some page, we can detect any visual changes on that page. So how it works in detail. So first we can write some widget, write some tests for it. On the Flutter test CLI command we have a special flag called update goldens, and when we run this command, this will generate our golden PNG files. And what happens if we modify this widget? So if we modify some widget, obviously now the output is different, so the test will fail. And what we have to do is basically, this is the part that is like manual, so basically we need to take a look at it and see if it's what we wanted or not. So this is like the manual part of actually this kind of testing. And if it's not what we wanted, then we basically need to go back to this widget and fix it. And if it's what we wanted, we can call the Flutter test with update goldens, which basically means that we want to regenerate those files, and those will be our new golden images. How it works in code, so it's pretty simple. We use the test widget method, the same as with normal widget testing. We can pump our widget, for example, some transaction item widget. We pass some test data to it, and then we can find this widget by type, and basically what makes this a golden test is a special matcher called matches golden file, where we pass a path to a file that will be generated and compared against. So that's the simplest golden test that you can write. In reality, this will probably not work as you expect it to, because you need to take care of some extra things. So most typically you will be using some things related to material app in your widget, like localizations, like text widget expects the directionality widget to be available on top of the widget tree. So we will need to wrap every widget that we test with some extra other widgets. And it depends on your app. If you're using some global dependencies in your app that your widget might be using, then you will also need to take care of it. Also, things that will not work out of the box are things like fonts. So by default, a Golden Test will use some special font which doesn't render actual text, but just some rectangles. But you can load your custom fonts. Also, you will need to set up images, shadows, surface size, because Golden Test by default will use some predefined size for the output. And the good news is that there are just packages that take care of all of it for you. So what I recommend to start with is Golden Toolkit, which provides some general utils that you will need in almost every project. Alchemist is another package well known, a bit more advanced, with a bit different approach, but that's the two that are most popular now. And things that we need to realize here with Golden Tests is that Golden Tests are just widget tests inherently. So what do I mean by that? So if we have some widget that requires some interactions, like for example an input, and we want to enter some text, then we can actually do this in our Golden Test. So in Golden Test we can use finders, we can use actions like tap, like enter text, like pump and settle. What we can also use is, for example, some third-party libraries related to widget testing. So I don't know if any of you have heard of Patrol, maybe a library. So maybe some people. Yeah, so Patrol is mainly for UI testing. It's not really for Golden testing, but it proposes like a new syntax for finders, a simplified syntax for finding some elements and doing actions on them. And you can also use this library in Golden testing. It's a library that we wrote and maintain at LeanCode. If you want to check out some more, visit our website. And now moving to the case study part. So let me give you some context of what we're talking about. So we were building a corporate banking app from scratch in Flutter for one of the major Polish banks. And simultaneously we were building a new design system. And Flutter was to be the first implementation of this design system. And other platforms like native iOS, Android, and the web would follow. We worked in 3 Scrum teams with 8 Flutter developers total, so quite a big project, and really wanted to set some robust guidelines for testing, because we knew that, especially with the design system, we didn't want any visual regressions during the project. So the first question to ask ourselves is, what do we really want to test? I'll be using some reference UI, some generic dashboard page for some like banking or fintech app. And let's take a look at the well-known test pyramid. So the simplest, the most common test pyramid has 3 levels. So it's end-to-end testing at the top, which libraries like Patrol solve. Integration tests in Flutter is often related to widget testing, typically, and unit testing is, most people think of unit testing in Flutter as testing some business logic, some state managements, like if you're using testing blocks or qubits. But what with Golden Tests? So can we put Golden Tests in any of those levels, really? So the answer is that Golden Tests can be used in different ways. So if we take a look at this UI, here we, for example, are using some widgets, some reusable components like transaction items that we use as our list items. And we can see that those items can look differently. So some items use images, some items use icons. So there are different variants of it. So we can test this in isolation. So we can write a golden test that will test different scenarios for this widget. And this is actually an actual output of a golden test written with Golden Toolkit library. So it allows you to render different variants in a single image. So we can say that we have a version with image, we have a version with icon. A negative amount should be using the red color as opposed to green. Which is also very nice is that we can test some edge case scenarios. So the most typical is what if the text is very long and if it doesn't fit in one line. So here we're using ellipses as text overflow, but we also could have multiple lines here. So this is something that can be easily overlooked during development, and golden tests give you a way to actually protect from further regression in that regard. So also if someone adds a new variant of this component, so modifies it some ways, so for example add extra description line or something, you can make sure that all other scenarios still work as expected. So this is looking at golden tests as unit tests, but we can also, and what most people typically do is look them as more kind of integration tests, because what we really want to test in the end is how our app looks like, and this is how the whole pages look. So this is very nice, because if we modify this our transaction item, and it's used on multiple pages, like dashboard page, like maybe some beneficiary history page in a banking app, maybe something related to things like mortgages, and those pages can be owned by different teams. You may know nothing about those pages, how they should look like, how they should work. And what's really what's very important about golden tests, that they are very useful during code review. So if you make some change to some component and it impacts some page, on GitHub, for example, you can, if you submit a pull request, you can easily use the slider to actually see the changes that have been made and verify them. So someone from that team, so you made some change that changed how page owned by some other team look like. They can take a look easily and visually verify if your change is correct or not. So what was our approach to golden testing in our project? And actually it was like the first big usage of golden tests that we did in our company, and some other projects followed later on. So we used some unit type of golden testing for some design system components, especially more complex ones. We set the principle that every page in the app had to have at least one golden test written for it. To really make that work, we needed to make some work to make those tests easy and fast to write, because if they would take like a day to write a golden test for a single page, that simply wouldn't work in a fast-moving project. And of course, the thing about golden testing is that they are like semi-manual, semi-automatic, because you manually verify the result. So it's very important to have some discipline during code review. So we actually don't skip those files during code review, but we take a closer look at them. So what we created is we had a custom extension method on the widget tester pump page, where we would pass the whole page navigation object, and we had a custom screen matches golden method, which would render the page in some different scenarios. I will talk a bit more about this later on. So this is now an integration test. So we're rendering the whole page, and the page can have its own state management. We used blocks, so it would typically create some qubit, which would call some API service or something. So as we use provider for dependency injection in our project, we also had an optional argument called providers, where we could pass some provider to this test. Typically, this would mean passing some mock API service with some predefined response. And this actually worked really well, because you can also, if you have some predefined responses, you typically need to write them for unit testing anyway. So you can also use them for Golang testing as well. And something that is important to realize, and it's a trap that you can fall into, is that Golang tests are not a replacement for widget tests. What do I mean by that is that you shouldn't use Golang tests for testing UI logic, for testing the behavior of your page. So what we did at some point, we had some very complex forms related to transfers. And what we would start writing at some point is having Golang files like this, so domestic transfer internal account. So this would represent some state of the domestic transfer form with some internal account chosen, but well, what does it really mean? So you don't really know what the test is, and if this file changes and you don't really know the domain very, very well, you cannot really tell if the difference is expected or not. So compare that to a widget test, a normal widget test, which would, for example, say when an internal beneficiary is selected from the dropdown, then information that the credited account is internal is shown below. So even if the description wouldn't be that thorough, you could still tell from the code what this test is actually doing, because you have some normal assertions at the end. So some widget is visible, it has some property set. So this is the way to test your form behavior, for example. And Golang test is just like a general representation of how your UI looks like. But what we would do in those Golang tests, we would like click through the form and then snapshot some state. But that results in many, many Golang files that you don't really understand. So basically, this approach worked really, really well for us. But one day came when we had to upgrade to macOS Ventura because in April this year, I believe, Apple required new apps to be uploaded built with the newest version of Xcode, and having the newest version of Xcode meant we had to use the newest version of macOS. So what happened is that we would start seeing this on the CI. So our tests would fail with 0.01% difference. Not all of them, but many, many of them. And if we take a look at those images, so on the left it is output from the dev machine, on the right from the CI. So like there's no difference. So a human cannot tell any really difference between those images. So what was happening? So we were using both macOS on our development machines and on the CI. The difference was that the dev team had all MacBooks with Apple Silicon, and the CI was still based on Intel Mac Minis. So this is a well-known problem. It's not really related to Flutter only. Other technologies like Android have the same problem. So Golang files are not really meant to be consistent between different environments. So things like operating system version, also Flutter version itself, CPU architecture, as we've seen, also some specific settings could be a problem. So basically, they make your tests look different. This is most related to text rendering algorithms, but also some rounding errors. This is not only text related, so you can create some examples only with some shapes that will render differently. So basically, what can we do about it? So first thing that comes to mind, we can use the same hardware, the same setup, but that can be really hard to do. often you don't have full control on the machines that all of your team is using. In our case, changing the CI machines would take probably a few months to get it done. In a corporate environment, you need a special budget for it, and generally it is a problem. And it can also be a problem in the future, even if it's solved now. We could say that use this fake font that we don't really see text anymore in our golden files. But as I said, that would not even solve all the problems probably. Another thing is that we can say, hey, let's have a single source of truth for all of them, of these images. So basically, we say we only generate and update golden files on the CI, and locally you can run your tests, but they are like using different files. So for example, this is what the Flutter team does. So Flutter team has a special web frontend for golden tests, which is called Flutter Gold. It is publicly available. You might check it out at this website. And basically, if you submit a pull request to the Flutter repository, you can run like a triage on this environment, and this will generate golden files on many platforms, so both Linux, macOS, Windows, the web. And during code review, someone can go there and actually approve or reject those changes. So this, of course, works, but it is a lot of setup to get it done. And if you have especially in smaller project, it is a lot of effort to get this done and set up. So we can say, hey, it's like only a 0.01% difference, so it's not really any significant difference. So can we somehow ignore this difference and call it a day? So it turns out that we can do it. So golden tests use a local file comparator class, and we can extend this class, and we can define some threshold, and we can modify the condition that we can say that if the test hasn't passed, but the difference was below the threshold, we can just let it pass. And this worked, this solved our problems, but only for some time. So with another upgrade of Flutter or macOS, we started seeing the failures again, but this time the differences were a bit higher, so they were like 0.5%, which is now a bit worrying, because in bigger images 0.5% can actually be some visible difference that we could easily miss. So we started looking in detail at those images. So what we realized is that the pixels that were different were only a tiny bit different. So it wasn't like the white pixel would be replaced with a black pixel in this CI failure, but they were like only, for example, it is the same color basically to a human eye. So we looked deeper into this comparison algorithm. So this local file comparator uses golden file comparator compare lists method. And if you look inside it, this is the actual comparison on the pixel level. So what it does is it takes a look at all channels separately, so red, green, blue, and alpha, and it basically looks at differences between all channels, between those two images. So what we realized is that the alpha channel was always the same. Alpha channel wasn't a problem at all. And the red, green, and blue channel would be off at most by 1. So they were either the same or the difference was only 1. So what we did is that we modified this. So this is a simplified version, so it uses like a 3. But what we did in detail, which I omitted for brevity here, is that we looked at each channel separately. So we would say if in the red channel was only one difference by 1, so the values are from 0 to 55, If it would be off by 1, we would let the test pass. And that actually solved the problem. So this, of course, combined with the previous condition for the general threshold. So we cannot let the test pass if the, for example, background changes, even if it's a slight change. But those two modifications of the comparison algorithm actually seem to work in our case. And we stopped having any problems with golden tests ever since. Of course, in theory, you could find some example that maybe this approach would break, but this is like you need to take some compromise. So basically, you either decide that you can ignore these tiny differences, or you write your own full-on setup with the CI generating the images. So now let's move on to some non-obvious use cases, which I call them, which is basically some way of inspiring you how you might be using, what the golden test might be used for. So first, we can use golden tests for testing how our app looks like on different screen sizes. So we can generate golden images for tablet, for example, size. So we probably don't really always test everything on tablets unless we have our client requires some special support for it. So to make sure that the app is still usable on tablets, golden tests are a very useful tool. Also things like internationalization. So on the left we have our app in English, on the right in Spanish. So we can generate the output for multiple languages. What's also different is not only translations, of course, but also things like formats. So English format for currencies is different than the one used in Latin countries. The same with time format. So in English-based countries, we use AM, PM. In other countries, we often don't use this. We use 24-hour format. So this is actually lets you take care of those differences in the UI. Also things like RTL languages. So this brings more, actually even more issues. So some icons, for example, we should mirror them for RTL languages. Some icons should not be mirrored. So Flutter gives you a lot by default, but you can still verify how your app looks like, for example, in Arabic. Also, things that's quite interesting is that is pseudo-localization. So Flutter actually has a package for that. What pseudo-localization is that basically it takes your ARB file with translations, and then it generates like a new fake language, which is a modification of your original translations. And it basically puts some national characters there, so you can make sure that they all render correctly. It also makes the text longer, so you can verify also for languages with longer words, like German. And it still makes the text readable. So even if it's that it's heavily modified, you can still see, for example, that this header here says transactions. So you can still like normally use the app. This is not some general garbage that you don't understand, but it's still a usable app, even if heavily modified translations are in there. So another thing is dark mode. That was, for example, very useful for us because we added dark mode like halfway through the project, and we basically modified our golden file configuration, and we generated a dark mode version for every page in the app, and we were able to catch a lot of bugs before even putting the app to manual QA testing. So that was really useful. We also used a lot of Markdown in our app, and the designers prepared some specification for Markdown, how different Markdown elements should look like in our app. And we basically recreated the specification as a golden test. So this is like a living implementation of their standard, and that was also very useful. Another things related to accessibility, so text scale factor. We should make sure that our app looks good. If someone doesn't see that well, and sets an increased font size. So that's also easy to test. Things that I have seen on iOS. iOS has a library called Accessibility Snapshot. I haven't seen anything like that for Flutter yet. But this is also a very interesting idea which shows your accessibility tree in like a visible form. So you can actually, from this output, you can see how your app will be read by a screen reader without actually using a screen reader. Because using screen reader for accessibility audit is long, expensive. So this is actually a quick way to verify if, for example, you broke something with the accessibility during your changes. So what we tested, actually, we kept it pretty simple for most part. We used font size in light mode, we used font size in dark mode, and we used tablet size in light mode. We didn't see any value if also generating tablet sizes for dark mode because the colors are the same. Something that's also interesting is that content files can be useful not only for developers, they can be useful for designers to also verify how your app looks like, if your implementation actually is correct, it actually follows their design. Also for testers, also for marketing and business, you can easily send them some golden file which shows some page in the app, and without needing the need to click through to that page, which sometimes can be very hard in some edge case scenarios. Something that you also can do is you can say that we're adding Arabic to our app, and we need to test if it looks correct on all screens, all pages. So we decide that we don't want to keep those golden files forever because they take size, they are hard to maintain. But maybe we could just do it once. So basically generate all those screenshots and send them to someone for an initial audit before they even start clicking through the app, which is a much longer process. And although I've talked only about images, because golden tests in images are golden tests in Flutter are related to images, the idea of golden testing itself is not strictly related to images. A golden file can be anything. So maybe you will find some use case for this type of testing, for example, with some JSON files, with HTML, which, for example, React testing libraries do. So just snapshot library captures like the HTML output of your React tree. Maybe some serialized data formats, stuff like that. I haven't used it myself, but it is a possibility. So to sum up all of that, so golden tests really worked great for us because we kept them an integral part of the whole development process. So we had set some guidelines that they had to be written for every page. We made the whole setup for them, so writing them for every page would be simple. So we optimized the way of writing tests. Before starting a new project, it's always good to ask yourself why and what you want to test. So maybe in your case, integration type of testing of pages won't be that efficient. So you need to ask yourself that question to fill your requirements. And think about those technical constraints. So mainly the CI, because that may hit you at some point. So it's good to have some strategy beforehand. So thank you. That's all from me.